This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven. And today I'm joined by Jemima Bowker, who I call Mimes, who is the representative in the company as a beginner gardener. And she also gardens on a balcony. So I feel she represents kind of my children's generation, early 30s, late 20s, with very small space to garden in, but somebody who really likes and wants to garden. And it's a definitely strong hobby for her. Hello, Jemima, how are you doing?
Hello, I am very, very well, thank you. Nice to be back here with you.
Good. Well, we thought today we would talk to you about sort of small space gardening in autumn. So what Jemima is thinking of putting on her balcony to take her through until, well, next summer when, so right now at Perch Hill, and I imagine Jemima's the same, we're unpicking all our summer pots as that season comes to an end. The autumn sort of has really got hold now. I've just shut all the windows here, actually. I suddenly felt really chilly. And so we're unpicking all our like cosmos and acidanthera, and the dahlias even are getting lifted. And we're starting to plant up with bulbs. And then they will stay in place until they stop looking lovely, which is normally by sort of early to mid-May. With Jemima in London, it might be a tad earlier, maybe a week or two earlier. Anyway, Mimes, what are you thinking? Should we start on your more sunny balcony first?
Yes, well, I'm not as organised as you and the team at Perch Hill because I have not. My pots are kind of limping on and I know I need to do something about it, but I'm kind of waiting until I've made a bit of a plan for my bulbs and what I want to grow before I take everything apart, because otherwise it just feels too sad. I don't think I can quite face that it's the end of summer just yet, even though we're very much marching through autumn. But my sunny balcony is, I've come to the realization this year that I've had a load out the back, which is where I get the sun. I've had lots of pots out of the back, but it's on top of this fabulous potting bench that I have. And actually it's a highly practical space. And by having pots all over it, I basically, if I want to do anything, I have to move everything around. Like we have a tiny little portable pizza oven as well. And if we want to get that out, I've got to move every single pot. So my husband, Charlie's, feeling like he's not getting a look in with the food stuff. And it's just pot domination. So I think that a learning is like, make the front balcony, which sadly is the one that doesn't get so much sun, but like make that one as lovely and beautiful and keep the back one not so full of pots so that we can actually walk through it and use it for certain things. But I do want to have a load of herbs out the back because we cook a lot and there's lots of great winter herbs. But I've now freed up some containers. So I have got a good size window box that I just like to cram with herbs. But I'm thinking, what's the latest that I can get them into a container going into this time of year? Because I haven't done it yet.
Well, there are two things that spring to mind as you're saying that. The first is in London, as I say, the microclimate is so different to out here. So even though we're 45 miles away, you can grow things and they will carry on flowering much longer than they will here. So even though frosts have become much rarer and milder with climate change, in this part of the world, normally the wet and the wind and the general light levels mean that things really struggle. They just no longer look nice. But, whereas when I'm walking around the streets of London, I see salvias. I mean, the classic one is Love and Kisses and Love and Wishes and all those. but also hot lips. And they look absolutely amazing right the way up till Christmas. So it really depends what you're growing. So it isn't too late, but I would say you just have to see when you've got time and see what's looking pretty ropey. I mean, if you've got pelargoniums, they'll go on looking good in London pretty late, whereas, cosmos would already be looking pretty ropey. So I think it depends on what you've got there. The second thing, as you were sort of talking about your lack of space, have you thought about those window boxes that have brackets that you can hang over the front of the sort of balcony balustrade?
Yeah.
Because I think, by having those even going out one side and the other side, so you have a double thing, they're rather brilliant in a way, because that just gives you so much surface area that doesn't involve the floor where you want to walk.
Yeah, no, I think that is definitely a good idea, and easier to do at the front where it's railings rather than a thick concrete wall, whereas at the back it's quite a thick wall. But I did see the other day, Caroline, our friend who helps with events and Chelsea and stuff like that, she sent me a photo of a pallet drilled onto the wall, and then you can sit pots within it, which was quite cool as well. But it's just whether I want to commit to doing that.
Well, you may not be allowed to by your landlady. Exactly. And then the other thing, which I'm sure you've thought of, is a plant theatre. So just, racking it up. I know you've got a sliding door, so, where it isn't sliding, and so getting in the way, you could always just line the thing with one or two plant theatres, and that, again, just increases surface area. But I'm sure you've thought of that.
Yeah, no, I think I'm definitely going to keep quite a lot out there, but I just need to rein it in ever so slightly. But I will I've got quite a lot of pelargoniums, so I will bring them inside, so that will free up some space. But I am worried about them because last winter, I took some cuttings and I had them on a windowsill inside in quite a hot, I was living with my in-laws at the time, and it was quite a hot house. And they got so many aphids inside. And I know I've told you about my aphid issues before, but I'm just like dreading bringing them in and them getting really sad over winter.
Mm-hmm. So I would have alternating with your pelargoniums is something really quite astringent. So even maybe we have these really lovely potted thyme and rosemary in the autumn and Christmas range, and I wonder about you trying that as a companion plant as you bring them in
and having them inside, keeping them inside.
Yeah, because I mean they're quite small, but then next spring you can pot them up and have them as a herb. But actually, in our trialing here, we found they were really pretty good at keeping things, basically effectively houseplants coming in, and keeping them aphid free. Because the thing, of course, if you think about a classic houseplant, the texture of the leaf is incredibly leathery and tough. And so the aphids, I mean, they're from obviously much warmer climates, and their pests and diseases are very different, but particularly their pests. Whereas a pelargonium is really soft. And that's why, particularly things like attar of roses can get quite badly infested. The other thing is to buy some garlic and basil and literally make yourself a tea of the garlic and the basil, and mixing the two together and just making a really strong tea. And then, to be honest, pureeing it, with a whizzer, and then straining off the liquid. And I know it'll smell like you're making a very strong pasta sauce, but actually, if you then dilute that 1 to sort of 6 into water and into an atomizer, I think you might find if you did that once a week, you would really make a big difference to the aphid attack.
Okay. And just one more, I know the plan was not to chat all about pelargoniums, but one more question. Do they need feeding over winter?
Gosh, no, I wouldn't. Again, always think about where they are in the wild. And I remember seeing pelargoniums walking up Table Mountain in South Africa. There was just such a beautiful range of wild pelargoniums. And of course, when they go into their winter, they go into complete dormancy. And so drought, and obviously it's, lower light levels, all that kind of stuff, but actually stopping watering, stopping feeding, I mean, really allowing them to go into a dormant period is incredibly important, because then they re-emerge like herbaceous perennial the following spring, and they will be much more vigorous and stronger. So I would recommend watering a small amount initially when you bring them in every 2 weeks, moving to once a month, literally, for sort of December, January, and then upping to once a fortnight in February and March, and then out they go again in London in April. That's the regime I would do. I mean, we should always check these things with Josie, because I'm famously terrible at houseplants. But
well, I will
that is what
I will sense check with Josie as well. But
Yeah.
that sounds like good advice. But yes, so outside the back, I'm thinking I have to have a few bulbs planted out there, though. And also because I want the front, which I'll come on to be kind of soft and warmy. There's certain really bold and bright, rich colours that I love and that I want to have. And actually, it's really nice when I'm at the sink washing up or cooking or anything and looking out the window, I can actually see what's out there. So this summer, I've been able to look out on a really hot pink salvia and a geum, and it's just been really nice because you walk into the kitchen and it's the first thing you see out the window. And so I think I need to have a bit of that kind of fab colour. So my favourite colourful tulip is marmalade. I just love it so much. I love
marmalade, yeah.
I love it's bright orange with that kind of green flash, but it is very tall, and so I guess it needs to be in quite a big pot. But if I put it in one of my biggest pots, I think it might be all right.
Yeah. I mean, it gets to 50, even 60 centimetres. Okay, so let's work back from that. So that will do you from the middle of April in London till, or maybe even earlier, maybe early April through to early May. So let's work back. So that's going to be absolutely stunning for, let's say, April into early May. So what are you going to put before that?
In the same pot?
Yeah.
Well, I think I'll have some narcissi.
Okay.
So this is good because I wanted to ask you about building a bulb lasagna. So this is us. We're planning my bulb lasagna. So tulip marmalade, green. Did you say orange marmalade? It's called.
Yeah, it's called orange marmalade.
So orange marmalade. So then if I'm choosing narcissi or daffodils for earlier flowering, do I want to choose something that's going to be height-wise? Does it really matter if they're the same? It's just whether it's in proportion with your pot, because they're not going to be crossing over at the same time.
It doesn't with orange marmalade because it's late. I mean, that's the good thing. So it's not going to compete with your narcissus if you can pick a narcissus that flowers from the end of February till the end of March, because then that will have gone over and you can deadhead it, and then up rockets your tulip to take over, which is exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And so as the narcissus foliage begins to just slightly brown at the leaf tip, as it will by the end of April, it doesn't matter because you've got this wonderful tulip.
Yeah. I always want to grow something that I can't buy in a nice florist or a shop. So I don't want to just grow like run-of-the-mill stuff. And that's why obviously we've got so many different exciting things. But I like the kind of cosmopolitan-y, carissy, kind of peachy coloured, trumpety, quite kind of wowy, showy, ridiculous ones.
Carice would be really good.
Yeah, because that's earlier, isn't it? So maybe I would have carice as my kind of March, or is it Feb-March kind of flowering. And then before that, I want to have as many Iris reticulatas as I can. I probably go for Purple Hill, or actually I'm also quite thinking, but maybe for somewhere else. There's a kind of goldeny coloured, is it? I can't remember what the name of.
Iris Danfordii,
which is quite beautiful as well. But I think for out the back, I think I'd probably have Iris Purple Hill, because looking out at that, and if I can see that out my window in kind of early February, that would make me really happy. So I think I'll do something like that out the back. And then I don't want to do too much else apart from maybe the other bright, colourful thing that I would love to have is the little Haggery Little Beauty, which are tiny.
I call it Haggery, but
Haggery.
Maybe right, it's Haggery.
Well, you're probably right. I love that. It's a tiny little. I don't know how tall is it. Kind of 10 centimeters, if that. Hot pink, little sweet, adorable tulip. And if I can cram quite a wide, shallow pot with some of those, that would be really nice. But the thing is which is a shame with where I am, is because I don't walk out that balcony to go anywhere. I'm in danger of just not really seeing stuff if it's out there, if I'm not going out. So I also want stuff that I can bring inside and put in my kitchen table.
Absolutely.
And I wonder how well stuff like that would be if, if I've got friends coming over, can I just bring the whole pot in and put it on the table?
100%. They come inside for the weekend. I mean, that's perfect. And then if possible, before you go to bed, as you're clearing up and doing the washing up, just put them back out in the cold. So just literally put them in a portable pot. So maybe better, rather than in one big one, put them in 3 little ones to have in series. But in, out, they go the whole time. I do that all the time. Just on that, I mean, so the iris will go in the top layer of your lasagna, the narcissus, which is next size up and next to flower, will go in the next layer. And the deepest of all, which is the latest, is the tulip orange marmalade. So just so anyone who's not made a lasagna before, the iris just tuck in under the compost surface and peat-free compost, ideally getting a saucer of water, cold water, dipping the bulb plate into the cold water and then into the bulb starter, which is mycorrhizae. And it really has, in our trials here, made a difference to how sort of bumper the flowers are. So anyway, iris in the top, narcissus in the middle. So about 5 centimeters, 4 or 5 centimeters below the iris. And again, 4 or 5 centimeters below for the tulip, just so everybody knows. And ideally, you're 4 or 5 centimeters of the tulip off the base of the container, just so you get that feeling of it being in a lasagna. So it's not pasta, tomato, meat, bechamel. It's compost bulb, compost bulb, compost bulb.
And those, like, if you've got a big container, the tulips can be pretty deep. Because when I first planted a bulb lasagna at Perch Hill, I thought, what the hell? These are so deep. Like, are these ever going to come up? Like, surely not. But as you say, they hit the surface and then they go. So it's amazing.
And it is amazing, isn't it? Because I remember when I first did it, I imagined they were going to be stumpy little stems with a big head. But I think they are literally conditioned that when the stem hits the light, that is what allows the elongation of the cells to happen. And so it's a sort of preset height, but it has to be in the light. So actually where the bulb is, I don't, to be 100% honest, know the total plant physiology here, but from having observed tulips for a very long time, that is what I'm guessing is happening.
It's just like with a small space, that is when I think bulb lasagnas are just the best thing you can possibly have, because I don't have the luxury of being able to be like, right, these narcissus are done, let's just go and put it around the corner and hide out at the back. Like I don't really have anywhere to hide with my garden. I can't even call it a garden, with my balcony. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And on the topic of small pots, if we chat about the front of the balcony, which is where I want to have a bit more bumper tulip action and bulb action, and I've got some bigger pots out there. I also want to have in small pots some of those adorable snake's head fritillaries, just in little pots that I can bring inside for when I have friends over and dot them down the table with lots of nice candles. Because I just think they're so beautiful, and also for pressing for me, because I like to press flowers. They're really beautiful to press as well. So if I can have some of those, when are they going to be actually flowering though? That's more.
So they flower April, really. And what I would say to you about the snake's heads, it's really easy to be a bit stingy with them, I think. And so what I would do with them is I would do them in their own lasagna. So there you're doing a top layer, which again, rather like the iris, you can just tuck 2-3 centimeters below the compost surface. But before that, I would actually have done another layer below that, because otherwise you tend to plant them a bit far apart. And to be honest, they just look a bit dotty and a bit skimpy and a bit sparse. So I really think with those beautiful fritillaries, they look best like you see them in the wild, which is almost in clumps.
Yeah.
So they're really, really dense, and then there's nothing. And then they're really, really dense. Oh, not nothing, but that's what you'll see if you go to the Thames Valley in April, or Magdalen Meadows in Oxford. You'll see that they definitely have sort of family habit, and so there'll be a generation of a sort of granny, a daughter, and a granddaughter, or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know why I said they're all girls, and then there's a bit of a pause, and then there's another community. So I think really cram them in, and I actually one year had quite a big shallow pot. And I, in fact, did a triple layer. And that is actually how I now do my crocus, because it just means that they're not competing with each other, weirdly. and they don't, or you have no danger of one rotting and letting all the rest rot, but you just get this absolute sensational impact. So I would go smaller pot, more bulbs rather than big pot.
Yeah, no, I think in little terracotta pots they look
Beautiful.
quite beautiful. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna, because on my balcony at the front I do have a table, because to my point earlier of not really being able to see anything, and if I'm not going out there, then I kind of miss it, because it's not like where you walk out your back door, you walk past where you've got all those containers in the Dutch yard. I kind of could go a couple of days without even looking at my balcony.
Yeah,
So
opening the door, unlocking the door.
so it's kind of like blink and you miss it. So
Yeah.
I do have a table, which is essential, because otherwise I can't really see anything that's going on out there. So on that table, I just want to have a selection of not too many tiny pots, but some smaller pots. And I really want to grow that little white petticoat bulbocodium narcissi as well. So I'm kind of just like planning a little family of small, sweet, nice pots on that table. And then bigger containers. I'm kind of building up a supply of a kind of real hodgepodge of lots of different pots and containers. But my kind of real palette that I think is my kind of go-to 90% of the time is the kind of soft and warm, but not too pale, and like nice, very more warm than soft, but with that like bit of the dark rich. So like some of the collections that we've got, like I just love, are like the plum and apricot, and the if I wanted the really frilly, but I don't think I do so much, the like Madame de Pompadour. Like it's just when the dark and the soft really go well together. That's where, like, for me, it's just like, oh, that's so beautiful. And that's kind of what I had with my bouquet for our wedding. And so I love that kind of colouring. And actually the Sarah Raven collection, which has the same, it's got your Sarah Raven tulip in it as well, which just adds, it kind of takes away from the sweetness of it. So I want quite a lot of that out there. So that's kind of the colouring that I'm going for. I haven't actually made a full exact plan of what I'm going to plant, but I'm getting there. But it's definitely more on the soft and warm kind of feeling.
That sounds really good, because also the plum and apricot one, which has got apricot fox, is it Ronaldo, I think, and Request. Request is scented, which is really nice. So that will be lovely wafting in if you do open the door. And the other thing is, I've grown them here in on the bottom of a hedge, which is quite shady. So I think you'll find they're pretty tolerant, that lot, of a certain amount of shade. And the Narcissus bulbocodium is perfectly happy in dappled shade. And actually, weirdly, the Fritillaries, classically, if you see them in the wild, they're out in the middle of a pasture or a water meadow. But again, I've got them here growing under a sort of sweet pea frame, which is quite dense and made with silver birch and stuff. And so it casts quite a lot of shade. And I've noticed that because it's naturalized and it's seeding, and also the bulbils are settling in, it grows perfectly happy in the more shady side as on the sunny side. So I think all those sound like really good bets. Yeah. I think you're right. The Madame de Pompadour, which are taller, they need more sun, more photosynthesis to really sort of make the show. I would say my instinct would be they would be better on your sunny side. So I think I would leave those.
And the one that is like the perfect bridge of those two color palettes, which I think you and Josie were talking about the other day, is Slower, which is because it's got that, it's like really deep, rich color, and then it's got that kind of soft apricot-y edge of the petal. Is that good in shady areas?
Yeah, I mean, we've got it here again. We've had it here in dappled shade. So we've got a really, really vigorous, beautiful eucalyptus called Nicholsonii, which I got because my husband's name is Nicholson, as you know. And we've got Slower that, to be honest, is almost naturalized underneath that. So, I mean, it is south-facing, but it's really tucked in underneath. So it will get a bit of a blast of heat, but only for a short period in the middle of the day. So I would say, yeah, Slower is fine. I mean, do you know what? Tulips, often when you see them growing in the wild, they're often really tucked in under things, maybe because they haven't been grazed there by the goat or the sheep or whatever. But I think they're much more tolerant than people give them credit for.
Because that was like, we have, collections of tulips for shade, and there are certain tulips that are, but like what I've always never quite known, I've always thought tulips will just be fine everywhere. But obviously, like to your point of the Madame de Pompadour, there are maybe some that just require like a bit more oomph. Is that kind of the general where you...
I'd say the parrots, which are kind of almost like the dinner plate dahlias, they're big and stonking and they flower later. And I think it's because they need more photosynthesis, more kind of food supply to really get them going. Although, of course, with tulips, actually, the food supply that they need is in fact stored in the bulb from the previous year. But I definitely tend to think the showier ones tend to be the later ones for that reason, which is that they just take longer to grow. And I think they do need to be in kind of more peachy, I suppose, conditions, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. And then I aside from bulbs, I really would like, I've always wanted it ever since, I remember you had it outside, I think your back door, which made me think it will be okay in a bit of shade. And you picked it with some like chocolate cosmos and one of the Pelargonium xyloides, or however you pronounce it, was the Pittosporum Bano Bay.
Yeah,
because just to have something that's a bit more permanent, like I need to have some stuff that's just going to be out there always. And I would love to have that in quite a big pot in time. So if I was to get those, would that, I mean, if I go to the far end of my balcony where it will get a bit more sun, it should be okay, shouldn't it? Do you
totally,
think?
yeah. Do you know, when that plant first arrived to be trialled, I was like, not overly keen on Pittosporum because I sort of was overexposed to them when I was a florist. Because they're sort of classic evergreen through the winter. So we were always buying them for winteries and things. But it was crimson. And I thought, I don't know, I'm not sure. But, I absolutely love that plant, partly because in spring, it's covered in this absolutely bright, vibrant flush of green leaf. And so you've got the dark crimson, bronzy colour, and then the green sort of halo, which I've always loved, that colour combination of crimson and sort of acidy green, but also partly because it's just so low maintenance. It's very drought tolerant, it's very heat tolerant, but it also will take dapple shade. It just seems to do everything. And we've had it growing in a terracotta container that's 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters. And again, I thought, gosh, that's not going to be big enough, but it's totally thrived. So, I think, I reckon we will pot it up next spring into a slightly bigger, deeper pot. But I'm crazy about it. And just as you say, when I start doing arrangements with hellebores in like February, when, to be honest, the actual amount of interesting foliage that's out there is pretty sparse, I turn to that Pittosporum and I pick it quite savagely. And yet, within 6 weeks, you wouldn't know I'd been hacking away at it. So it grows back pretty quick. I really recommend it.
Yeah, and I just think if that's, because it is that kind of dark leafed, I just think it would go quite well with everything else that I want to have out there, is my thinking. But I need to get the right compost, because if I'm planting a perennial, I can't just be using our basic kind of normal peat free, or would that be fine, or would you want...
Yeah, no, I think that's what we're growing it in. And then I think that will do for 18 months or so. And then when you're doing the pot on like we are, so I think we planted ours in spring 23, and so in spring 25 I will repot it, I think.
Right.
But also I'm just thinking, for your colour palette, what about one of those rather amazing, very trendy brandy snap coloured heucheras?
Yes, I was thinking about those because they are happy shady ones. That's a good, thank you for reminding me. I'm taking notes as we speak. But yes, I think they're really fun, actually. Do they, when they flower, can you cut them? Do they?
Yeah.
And do they keep coming?
Yeah. They're one of the perennials along with polyanthus. I mean, there are a few that are genuinely seem to be pretty much cut and come again. So you pick them and they just grow back really quickly, a bit like rhubarb. And if you sear the stem end in boiling water, every heuchera, in my experience, and then put them into cold water, lasts really well in the vase. And they're very trendy. All those wonderful florists like Anna Potter, Swallows and Damsons, or Millie Proust or Willow Crosley, they're keen on their old heucheras because they give you, of course, an evergreen, a homegrown leaf, green and gorgeous. Rachel Siegfried, I think they all use them because they give you a really elegant, interesting leaf that isn't sort of, holly or even rosemary, but which I love. But anyway, they just give you a much more interesting shape.
And I would have that in I can imagine that would look really lovely, like in one of the leaf planters or something.
Yeah,
quite
exactly.
elegant. What kind of size container does that need to be in?
I would say double depth and double width of the root ball, something like that. And there is one thing which I'm sure you know about, is that they do have a predisposition to vine weevil.
Yes.
And particularly in London, that can be a bit of a problem. So I genuinely would once a month just flip it out onto your hand. So, sitting the leaf side onto your hand and just have a little bit of a check that there aren't any of those big, fat, grubby maggots. And if there are, you can get one of the green biological control and you can just water it on. And Arthur Parkinson, who has heucheras at home, uses it and says it works really well. So that's what I would do.
Okay. And one final question about pot toppers. I have sown some viola seed, which doesn't really look to be doing much. How long does that typically take to germinate?
Which is it? Is it a perennial or an annual variety?
Tiger Eye Red.
Oh, Tiger's Eye Red. Funnily enough, it is perennial in some climates, and so it is slightly slower to germinate than our wild heartsease. So I would say 6 to 8 weeks to germinate and then prick it out. But then it's really quite quick growing. So I think you have left it a tad late. I think I would have sown it in June, July, perhaps.
I think I'd know it was on the cusp. No, I didn't do it in June, July. I did it in beginning of September.
Okay. Well, yeah.
I'll wait and see. I'll travel hopefully. And then also I wouldn't mind having some wallflowers, but again, sun-wise, I don't know how well they'll do out the front.
So there are a few, certainly the perennial or semi-perennial ones like Bowles Mauve, they prefer sun. But there are a few of the biennial ones. There's one called Giant Pink that grows perfectly happily in shade at Sissinghurst. I remember seeing it. On the whole, they're better in sun because it releases their scent. But I actually think wallflowers, they might get a bit leggy, but just to do one season, I think they'll be fine.
Yeah. Well, I'll see how I go. But I think it's just nice not to look out over bare pots. So if I can put them on top, it would be ideal. I can't imagine much is going to get to my pots because I'm on a balcony high up in the air, but I guess we'll just wait and see how I get on with that.
And do you ever see grey squirrel action? Or they don't get up?
No. Well, but I haven't been there when I've done bulbs, so
okay.
I'm going to have to come to Perch Hill and load up my car with rose prunings.
Yeah. So just for anyone who has got a balcony that you have seen a bit of either perhaps pigeon, but much more commonly grey squirrel action, then get some prunings from somewhere, whether it be from a holly bush or even sea holly, or best of all, rose prunings, and lay it over the top. And genuinely, that's what we have found is the most effective way of keeping those naughty rodents off your bulbs. Brilliant, Mimes. That sounds like it's going to be great. And I very much look forward to coming to visit and seeing it.
Well, thank you for all of your advice. I've taken lots of notes, so I'm ready to go now. No excuses.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cookie to Range. It was great. I love talking to Jemima Bowker, who is our new balcony gardener and our beginner gardener, although she's not quite a beginner. Anyway, it was fun. And next week, I'm joined by a really inspirational young chef, Julius Roberts, whose book I've been using more than any other over the last few months. He has a small holding down in the southwest, and he is full of wonderful ideas of how to live and how to cook. So see you then.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.